Hello, third grade. Today we're going to be starting lesson 4 of chapter 5. And so today we're going to be learning why do we follow rules. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the difference between laws and rules. We're going to be describing some familiar rules and why they're important, as well as talking about what consequences mean and what happens when rules are broken. We're going to be talking about what it means to be a good citizen and, of course, writing some rules in order to complete your Chapter 5 Constitution. If you're working at home, then you can go ahead and work on how you see that there are rules applied in your house. What are some rules that you've seen there? What are some consequences to breaking those rules? And so rules are everywhere. They are not just in one specific setting, one specific place. We have them in lots of different situations. And so think about, why do we have rules? Why do we have laws? What is the reason why we have them? And so let's go ahead and get started. We're on page 218 in your textbook. Why do we follow rules? And so here you have a picture of a crossing guard. So a crossing guard is not as familiar now. We don't have them as often now, but in the past, they were very common. And then before we had stoplights, you might have remembered from our previous chapters when we were talking about who created stoplights, the earliest designs for them and everything. We had police officers designating traffic. So that means that they were showing traffic which way they had to go. Maybe they were going, across the street, maybe they were turning. And so now we don't really have officers controlling traffic, but we do have crosswalks still, and we have sometimes crosswalk officers that will help around schools. So let's go ahead and get started. And what do you think that the crosswalk officer is doing? Why do you think he's holding the sign? Do you think that the students, because you can tell from their backpacks, right? Do you think that they have to listen to the crosswalk officer? And what do you notice is happening with the setting? What's going on in the background? Is the car still moving? All right, let's go ahead and get started on our next page. So before we begin, read the inspect portion. So we're going to be reading the title and looking at the paragraphs. And then you're going to be circling the word fine. And so I want you to think about the word fine in this setting, in this situation. Are they talking about fine as in good, or are they talking about a different type of fine? And so what clues can help you figure out what it means? You're going to be underlining clues that tell you why sports have rules about wearing safety equipment. And then you're going to be highlighting, or in this case, you can underline it, or you can actually circle it. What could happen to people who do not wear seatbelts? And so let's go ahead and begin with safety rules and laws.
Have you ever played football or soccer? These sports have rules that players must follow. In football, you must wear a helmet and pads to play. In soccer, you usually wear shin guards. Why do you think sports have these rules? The rules are to help keep the players safe. The laws of your community also help keep you safe. Here's an example. People who wear seat belts are less likely to get hurt in a car accident. All states have laws about wearing a seatbelt when riding in a car. If people do not wear one, they could get a ticket and pay a fine.
So now that we've read this first page, what do you think a fine means? If you guessed that a fine is when you have to pay something from your context clues, then you're correct. A fine is when, for example, you break a rule and then you have to pay something, or sometimes that could mean in the past lots of different ways that you could pay for something. Maybe you paid in your property, maybe you paid in money, maybe you paid in something else. Now we would just use money. And so you have to pay a fine or a ticket, right? A ticket means that you did something and then they recorded it, and then you're paying a fine for that mistake. And so here we have seatbelts keep us safe when we ride in a car, and car seats keep babies safe while they're in a car. Why do you think we use car seats for babies and seatbelts for older kids? And so for your extra credit question, you can go ahead and leave a comment on Google Classroom. And I want you to think about the word consequences. We talked about it earlier, but when we say the word consequences, then we are talking about what happens when something else happens. So if you think of cause and effect, you can think of consequence. For when something happens, a consequence is what happens because something happened. So if, for example, you drop an egg, right? That's a cause. The effect is now the egg yolk is all over the floor. That's the effect. So the consequence of you dropping the egg, right, is that the egg it broke all over the floor. Or you can even say the consequence of me dropping an egg is that I had to clean up my mess. And so this is what we think of when we say the word consequence and we think of the word cause, because we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on. So remember, consequence means results or effect. And so let's go ahead and read the next portion.
Thousands of people are hurt in car accidents every year. Wearing a seatbelt can mean the difference between life and death in an accident. Laws help make sure drivers and passengers stay safe by wearing a seatbelt. Advertisements remind drivers and passengers to buckle up. Police follow a click it or ticket program to protect people in cars. In many states, police officers can stop a driver if they see someone in the car not wearing a seatbelt. A parent can be fined hundreds of dollars if a child is not buckled up. The police take car safety very seriously. You should too. Communities make rules and laws to keep people safe.
And so here we saw the click it or ticket program. If you haven't heard of it, it might be something that started before you were born. The click it or ticket program was an advertisement that was used to remind people that if they don't wear a seatbelt, or if someone in their car, for example, their child is not wearing a seatbelt, then they could get a ticket for that, especially if you are in your family's car because they're responsible for you. And so what do you think happened because they had the click it or ticket program? Because getting a ticket for whenever you're not wearing a seatbelt was already in place. But to remind people, what do you think was happening that they had to create an advertisement? Well, if they weren't using their seatbelts before the advertisement came out or before the slogan came out, then they might start wearing it because now they know, oh, if I don't, then if I get caught doing that, there's going to be a fine. I might get in trouble. Maybe even there might be a ticket for me. And so, and this includes for the children with you. And so that's why it's very important, because not only are you paying a fine, it's also very dangerous if you drive in a car and you're not using a seatbelt. If there's an accident, there's nothing to hold you or restrain you from flying through. If, for example, you're in the front, or if someone hits you from the side, maybe you're in a car, there's nothing to hold you back from moving. There's instead you'll go flying through the other side, maybe, depends on the situation. So make sure that you've already underlined, you've already circled the word fine, you've already highlighted what would happen to people who don't wear seatbelts, and then I want you to try going through this portion. I want you to reread why is it important to obey laws, examine what are the consequences, what are the results of breaking seatbelt laws. And so why do you think the click it or ticket program was important? What do you think happened as a result of that? And so we'll go ahead and flip over to the next page. For this page, we're going to be talking about cause and effect, kind of how we were saying earlier. So we can go ahead and start from the beginning. Yes, we have done this before, but in case you forgot, that's okay. A cause is why something happens, and effect is what happens. As you read, look for the causes of things. Remember, we're looking for something that caused something else to happen. Read the text all the way through. That's the first thing you need to do because it'll help you understand what the text is about. Look for signal words such as because or as a result, because they show that this thing happened because of something else. These clues often show a cause and effect relationship. The third thing you can think about is time order. So a cause happens before an effect. So usually we don't necessarily put the effect first and then what happened before that effect. We will instead put it in chronological order. So first this happened, then something else happened. That's called chronological order. We've talked about it in ELA before, but we've also talked about it here. So first something happens, then something else happens as a result of it. And then we have to ask ourselves why something happened. So it's not just that, oh, something happened. We need to figure out why it happened. Then the last thing we need to do is remember that a cause may have more than one effect. So earlier I gave the example of the egg, right? Maybe if, for example, you want to talk about the cause for the egg dropping was that it was wet or it was slippery, right? And so as an effect, it dropped. But then another effect of that is that egg got all over the kitchen because it dropped on the floor and it cracked open. So there can be more than one effect for those things. It doesn't just have to be one thing. And so let's go ahead and try to complete this annotated notes using the information that we saw on our previous page. So let's use our guided notes here. We have cause and effect. So we know that we're going to be looking at these two. And so we see a football player does not wear a helmet on the field, and that's in the cause category. What do you think is going to be the effect of a football player not wearing a helmet in the field? And so you can go ahead and write what you think might happen. If you've ever seen someone playing football, then you might see that it can get kind of violent because if you are tackling someone, if you're running and bumping into people, then it is dangerous. And if your head, right, where your brain and everything else is, your eyes, all of that, if it's not protected, then what could happen if you're playing a rough sport on a field? Well, they could get hurt. And then, of course, if they get hurt, will they be able to play anymore? Probably not. Can cause lots of different damages. So maybe that's the effect that you wanted to write about. The second thing, here, we don't have a cause, but we have an effect. So the effect that they gave us was the child's parents could be fined hundreds of dollars. Well, then what could cause the child's parents to be fined hundreds of dollars? You can go ahead and go back to your text and read through it again and try to figure out what exactly could have caused the child's parents to be fined hundreds of dollars. What were we talking about on those previous pages? Who is responsible for you? And so the child's parents could be fined hundreds of dollars. What was the setting? What was the situation? What was the cause that you noticed on the previous pages? And you can go ahead and answer the second one by yourself. So using your resources just from the previous pages, go ahead and answer that one. Then we're going to get started on page 223. It's similar to the setup we just saw just now, where they're going to give us either a cause or an effect, and we're going to try to fill in the blanks. So before we begin, we see that we have no cause for the first one, but we have an effect. And it says people in the community are safer. So we need to find something that causes people in the community to feel safer. Now that has the effect that people in the community are safer. For our second one, we see that copying another student's homework is dishonest. That's a cause. So what could the effect of that be? Using our reading, we're going to find out. Then we have another cause, a person breaks the law. What could a possible effect of that be? I want you to start thinking about it now. And then as we're going through the text, you can go ahead and fill that in. Then we have another one where this one, the cause is blank, but the effect is the cyclist breaks the laws and is not safe. So what could the cause of that be before the cyclist breaks the laws? What could make the cyclist break the law and is not safe? And then our last cause is a person wants to be a good citizen. So what is the effect of that? All right, let's go ahead and go through our textbook reading. So as we're going through, if you hear anything that might be applicable, that might work for any of these boxes, you can go ahead and start filling them in. You don't have to wait until after we're done. You can fill them in with what causes you think work or what effects you think work. So we're on page 234 in your textbook. Why do we follow rules, obeying rules and laws?
When you ride your bike, you must stop at a light. Before you can speak in class, you must raise your hand. Do you know which of these examples is a rule and which is a law? Rules are set by people like your parents or your teacher. Rules help people get along well and work together. They help teach you right from wrong. Rules can also help you learn to respect one another. Laws are set by the government. They are the rules that you and all the members of your community must follow. Laws help keep people safe. They also make sure people are treated equally. People set rules when they want to solve a problem or improve a situation. Parents and teachers can just tell others the new rule or write it down. Government officials cannot do that. They have to talk about the law to make sure it is good and fair. Then they vote on it. Sometimes their idea becomes a law, and sometimes it does not.
So here we talked about What is the difference between a rule and a law? And why? Sometimes when we have laws, what is the reason for them? In the beginning, we talked about when you ride your bike, you must stop at a light. And when you speak in class, or maybe when you're speaking in a situation where there's a lot of different people and they're asking you questions, you might raise your hand to show that you are trying to say something. Which one of these is rules and which one of these is laws? And so we talked about rules in the second paragraph. We talked about laws in the third paragraph. And then down here, we talked about both of them. People set rules when they want to solve a problem or improve a situation. Parents and teachers can just tell others the new rule or write it down. But government officials don't do that. They cannot do that. They have to talk about the law to make sure it's good and fair. They have to talk about it with other representatives. Then they vote on it, and sometimes their idea becomes a law, but sometimes it doesn't. So just because they thought of it doesn't mean it necessarily becomes it. And down here we have the caption, rules make sure that everyone in class is heard. Why do you think it would be important to feel heard inside of a classroom? When you think about rules, or when you think about people talking inside of a classroom, do you think that it is important for everyone to be understood? If you're working with a bunch of people, do you think that everyone wants to have their ideas or their words heard, or do you think that everyone wants that their ideas are talked over or that no one's paying attention to them? And so when we say the word respect, what do you think of? Are you thinking of people being considering to you? Do you think that they consider your ideas important? Do you think that they're caring about you or that you are caring about someone else? And so what do you think will happen if there aren't any laws or aren't any rules in a situation? So if we're talking about laws and how they protect people, what do you think the purpose of rules are? Here it says it could help to make sure that everyone is being respectful of each other. And we just talked about what respect can mean. So we need to make sure that rules are there to help everyone work together. And of course, laws help everyone as well. But don't forget, one of them is started by the government. The other is something that might be done by someone who is in charge. And so this is the difference between rules and laws. One of them is legal, and the other one is talking about certain situations. And so a rule helps people get along well and work together, but a law is set by a government to keep people safe and make sure that people are treated equally. And so what do we see in this photo? We talked about raising your hand. Why are they raising their hands here? Do you think it's so that way they can all shout out answers at the same time? Unless the teacher requires it. In this case, if they're raising their hand, they're usually taking turns sharing their ideas, figuring it out. So they're trying to take turns so they can listen to other opinions. Let's go ahead and go to the next page.
Rules are important because they teach people how to behave and how to treat others. Your classroom rules help you learn about fairness and honesty. You do not cut in line because it is unfair. You do not copy another student's homework because it is dishonest. There are also rules against bullying. People who follow the rules try to do what is best at all times. The laws of your community are created to protect people's safety. It is against the law to drive faster than the speed limit. This law protects walkers and other drivers. Restaurant workers must wash their hands. This protects the health of their customers. Laws also protect our property. For example, it is against the law to go into a house and take something without permission.
And so on our other pages, when we were talking about rules and laws, again, this paragraph is talking about rules, this paragraph is talking about laws. And so if you're not sure and you needed more information about the difference between rules and laws, we separated them again. And here we have the caption, rules help people get along and treat each other fairly. A driver who speeds is breaking a law. He or she may have to pay a fine. Why do you think speeding is illegal? Why do you think that's against the law? We know that it's not we know that as a rule, right, people shouldn't be going very, very fast. But why? Why might that be something that could be dangerous for other people? And then I want you to think about here when we see our line. Whenever we have a line, why do you think that it isn't just people jumping in at any point? Why do they line up quietly? Why do they line up slowly behind each other? What is the benefit of that? And earlier we talked about property. So if we say that's someone's property, are we just talking about a piece of land? Or do you think that can also apply to things like maybe a pencil, a paper, their toys, all of those things? Do you think those count as property? If you've ever played Monopoly, you've definitely heard of property. And so property is anything a person owns, like clothing, a computer, maybe a phone, could be a house or a car. And when you think of rules at a school, what are the advantages of obeying a rule? If you're at home and you're following all of the rules, what are some benefits of that? What are the disadvantages of breaking a rule? And so now we can go ahead and start filling in for our other page, for our guided notes. We've already talked about how rules include copying other, why we don't copy from other people's work. What do you think would happen? Why is that something that you would not want to do? And so let's go ahead and read for the next page. And if at any point you need to stop or you need to pause, you can go ahead and pause the video.
What keeps people from breaking a rule or law? All rules and laws have consequences. A consequence is something that happens as a result of something else. If you know what the consequence will be, you might not break a rule. Your family may have a rule that you must do your homework before you watch your favorite show. You know the consequence for not doing your homework is that you cannot watch your favorite show. This means that you will probably do your homework. People who break laws are punished. They may have to pay money or go to jail.
So on page 223 in your textbook, we talked about how an effect is people in the community are safer. Do you think that they're talking about rules or do you think they're talking about laws in that situation? And so if you're thinking that laws are set by the government, and so government laws are to keep everyone safe, then yes, you're correct. When we talked about how copying from another student's homework is dishonest, what do you think the effect of that is? Well, if you're copying from someone else's work, are you really learning it? But if you're doing it on your own, then you're probably going to understand it better than just copying it off of someone else's paper. And then when you think about a person who breaks the law, what do you think the effect of that is? We just read about it here. People who break laws are punished. They may have to pay money or they go to jail. Let's go ahead and keep reading. Did you know? In Pennsylvania, there are many laws about bicycles. Your bike must have a brake. You cannot carry a passenger unless your bike is designed to hold a passenger. Also, you must wear a helmet whenever you wear a bike if you are under the age of 12. If you're caught without a helmet, your parent or guardian may have to pay a fine of $25. So, this is included with obeying bike laws. You might think that it's not a big deal, but a lot of times when kids are hurt, especially if they're using their bikes, then it's something that's avoidable. There is a way that you can avoid it by taking care to make sure that your head is protected. Maybe you have elbow pads, knee pads, so that way if you fall down, you are not hurt. And because if someone didn't see you, maybe for example, there's a car, it's coming and it didn't see you because, you're shorter or something, and then if you end up getting hit on your bike, if you're wearing protective gear, that might help you. And so by making this a rule for everyone in Pennsylvania, they're trying to keep everyone safe. And so we talked about how a cyclist breaks the law and is not safe. What is the cause of that? Well, in Pennsylvania, we saw that if you're under the age of 12, you have to wear a helmet. But if you don't wear a helmet, then of course you're breaking the law and that's not safe for you. So you can go ahead and fill that one in as well. Let's go through our last two pages. Being a good citizen.
Good citizens follow the rules and laws of their communities. They know that rules and laws protect everyone. They respect the rights and opinions of others. They are also honest and trustworthy. Good citizens believe in the common good. This means that they do what is best for their communities. They might serve as government leaders. They might volunteer to help clean up their local parks. They do what they can to make their communities better places to live. Most importantly, citizens support the rules and laws of the United States. Good citizens know that every American has the right to worship as they wish. Every American has the right to an opinion. Every American has the right to be treated fairly. Good citizens follow the laws to protect everyone's rights and differences.
For our last box on page 223, we talked about a person wants to be a good citizen. So what are some different ways that you saw people can be good citizens? So we saw here that it says a good citizen follows the rules and laws of their communities. They know the rules and laws and protect everyone. They respect the rights and opinions of others, and they're also honest and trustworthy. Well, let's see how they did that. We said that they might volunteer to help clean up local parks. Maybe they are trying to be government leaders. Maybe they're trying to help their communities in other ways. And so you can talk about any of those reasons. A person wants to be a good citizen. What is something that you can do? Let's go ahead and read this last page so we can have some more ideas. And then you can go ahead and fill in that last part of your guided notes. Here we have the caption, being good citizens, and citizens serving on a jury.
American citizens have certain responsibilities. A responsibility is a duty or job. All American citizens have the responsibility to vote. When citizens vote, they choose the people who will make and enforce the laws. Good citizens follow the news to stay informed about the issues that affect their communities. This helps them make good choices about what their communities need. American citizens are required to serve on a jury if they are asked. A jury is a group of citizens who are chosen to decide a court case. A jury helps make sure that a person who is accused of a crime has a fair trial. A good citizen pays taxes. Taxes help pay for the services in your community. Taxes pay for services such as schools, libraries, and police and fire departments.
And so we've talked about taxes in the previous lesson. In case you weren't sure, taxes do help provide for the community. They do take care of the community. Sometimes taxes do go to your state. And so everyone is able to use, well, more specifically, the government of your local area or the government of your state will use those taxes in order to help the community. Maybe it's by building something that everyone in the community needs, or by creating something in your local area. Maybe it's to help pay for local schools. All of these different things is where tax money goes towards. Now that we've finished our last page, we can go ahead and fill in our last box from our notes. And so you could go ahead and fill in some different ways that you saw a person can be a good citizen. If you want to talk about serving on a jury, maybe you want to talk about volunteering, maybe you wanted to say that people will donate things to their local community, shelters, whatever, you can go ahead and talk about that. And then we can get started on the next page. So if you need to pause, go ahead, and then we can get started here. So on page 224, you need to ask yourself, why do you think it's important to have rules and laws? Because again, rules are things set by people, right? But laws are things set by the government. And so describe what are some rules you follow at home. Describe 2 rules and what might happen if you don't follow them. So you can go ahead and talk about any of the rules that you have at home. Maybe it's that you have to clean your room before you can go play with your friends. Or maybe it's that you have to do your chores before you can watch cartoons. All of these different things are rules that you have in your own household. Then, for the explain portion, based on what you've read in this lesson, why do you think it's important to have rules? Do you think that these rules are put in place to be unfair? Do you think these rules are put in place to make it hard for you? Or do you think these rules are put in place to take care of you and to keep you safe? Why do you think that these rules are connected? So if we think about maybe, for example, if you make a mess, you have to clean it up. Why do you think that that's a rule? Do you think that other people should always have to clean up after you? Or do you think that that's something that you should take care of because you were the person who made that mess? Or if you wanted to talk about how maybe you have your house has a rule, you can't hit your sister or you can't hit your sibling. Why do you think that that's a rule? If people are allowed to hurt each other, do you think that that is something that should be allowed? And what do you think is the effect of that rule? Because we've been talking about a lot of causes and effects. What do you think are results of rules being in place? And then on page 225, think about what you've read in this lesson. How do rules and laws help us live together? So again, rules are by people, laws are by the government. So why do you think rules and laws can work together? So if we're talking about, maybe you have a rule that at home or even anywhere, that you have to talk to everyone respectfully, right? And now you take this rule and you say, oh, I'm going to also treat everyone else respectfully. Because as a law, right, we should all be, or do you think that as a law, we should be talking to each other disrespectfully? In your classroom constitution, you're going to be actually talking about this because you're going to be saying which things do you think are so important that we should all follow them in order to keep each other safe, in order to make sure everyone is respected. And yes, we are talking about rules in that case, but if you're thinking of your own constitution, things that you think are important that everyone should follow, how do you think that these rules and these laws can work together? So when we think about laws and how they keep everyone in a community safe, we're talking about not just something that is just for you. We're talking about something that works for everyone in your household or everyone in the classroom. So when we talk about maybe raising our hand before we speak, or taking turns to listen, or paying attention during class or when someone is talking to you, do you think that these are things that are important? And so if we're saying that these are important for everyone, in order to make sure that everyone is safe, to make sure that everyone is heard, how do you think these rules and these laws connect? So this is the end of this video lesson for chapter 5, lesson 4. Go ahead and start working on these portions of the pages. If you haven't completed your previous pages or you haven't finished annotating, you can go ahead and start doing that. And then upload it to Google Classroom. Of course, use your neatest handwriting. Please put your name and date on all of your pages. And then if you have any questions, leave a comment on Google Classroom for me as well. And I can't wait to see what you're going to put for your classroom constitution. The assignment is already on Google Classroom, so if you're not sure, you can leave a comment on there and I can try to help you with it there. If you're working on it, make sure you talk to your family about it because there are rules in your household that you might not have realized are rules. And so ask your parents, ask your family, what are some rules that they've heard about? What are some rules that they know about? All right, that is the end of this video lesson. So I will see you in our next video.